pleasure to meet you all. Exciting to see so many people interested in circular economy. InvestCEC is a project, as it was outlined, of the European Union, where we try to bridge basically private businesses towards collaboration with city utilities, as circular economy always needs a tight collaboration with the public sector. The InvestCEC fund, which is one of the targets of the project, which we have to raise on from the private sector, shall basically foster innovation, bridge private companies towards the public sector, and get them into collaboration. So basically in a business collaboration, and this needs some very key knowledge points, right? In basically, how do public tenders work? How do I need to prepare if I want to tackle such a big client as a city utility? Because it's different if you work with a small medium enterprise as a client, other than if you work with a city, with a municipality. You also have an influx of politics, communications are different, etc. So there's a number of different drivers that we have identified on the positive side for the private sector. They collaborate with city utilities, but there is also some stumbling stones that we came across with, where we try to outline a certain concept in how those companies need to be prepared to basically work and lift a big client like a city utility. So there's a number. We have around 75% of EU citizens living in urban areas. So the potential for circular economy is immense if we can get into the smart city logistics, into waste management. Green tech and sustainability can also help if you have a new, let's say, water plant, or basically increase the amount of renewable energy in a city. So there's various sectors, right, that are interesting for a city utility. And usually if they invest, they build a plant, right? Now, a fund in this sector can obviously not lift those gigantic investments of a city, but it can provide a little piece in the chain, right, that they need to have a higher degree of circularity within the cities. So the objective of our work is to identify the missing links, those pieces that can move the needle, right, and make the city utilities more efficient with little products, right, that increase their efficiency in these key sectors. And waste and logistic is by far the most important, are the most important sectors in this field. If we flip to the next slide, please. What we have identified across Europe is that we have many different hubs, and we just gave an example here on this picture, in this market opportunity, that certain strengths are basically located or accumulated in certain hubs within the European Union. Now, this makes it also difficult because we have different jurisdictions, different legal environments, but you find the best of breed. For example, in the field of waste management, you find a lot in a small city in northern Germany, in Kiel, for example. While in Copenhagen, renewable energy is big, or in Amsterdam, you find great companies in the field of smart logistics. Or in Berlin, in more general, on the green tech sustainability software side. So in the broader sector of software-driven clean tech and sustainability, sustainable urban planning solutions. So this basically makes for us the necessity that we have deal flow from all across Europe, and that we need to market such a fund all across Europe, that the companies in the specific fields where we are scouting know that this fund exists, and that with an investment, they can enter a client relationship. In addition to the funding they get from us, they can also enter into a collaboration with a city utility and ideally replicate this all across Europe. So deal flow likely will come from all across Europe because of the different special fields where certain hubs have organically specialized and have showed a particular strength in. In Europe, we have a little bit of this narrative at the moment that circular economy is great and sustainability is great, but nobody's really willing to fund it. And the reason behind is most of the funds are publicly driven, public sector driven, or public sector money in private hands under management, which shall not be the case with this fund that we're raising here. And basically, people think that there is not a lot of profit to be made in this clean tech area. So we have to basically look for companies that are scalable with a high growth potential. We have to have a management that is suitable to, scale a company and manage it under a certain growth. Because again, a city utility is a very big client. And if you want to replicate that all across Europe, you also face challenges that your company will become basically a little bit corporate over time, right? So it's a transformation from the garage to a quite sizable business, which we want to enable. So what we need to do is we need to find the right management. We need to connect them with strategic partners, industry leaders, so those that are suppliers to the city utilities. This is also strongly encouraged to the city utilities that they establish these partnerships, right? Because those startups usually add a feature or a sensor or something that basically needs to work within the solution tool set of a city utility. Obviously, we need to build a diversified and resilient portfolio, meaning we need to build up 20 to 25 companies that we work with, and we need to have a transparent impact, because under the SFDR regulation of the European Union, we need to also monitor that the companies we're investing in make a difference on the ecological side. And this we need to evaluate before investment, in particular for the field of circular economy. So the degree of circularity is something we try to measure. And here we developed a model that is specifically designed for this topic, which is quite a pioneering work, because for general sustainability ESG, this was done, but for the focus set of circular economy, this is actually a specialty that was worked out with the consortium of InvestCEC. Please flip to the next slide. So with InvestCEC, we basically leverage on a strong network of partners to ensure robust deal flow, because as I said, we need deal flow from all across Europe, and here the European-wide consortium is actually quite helpful, and also the visibility through the EU project. Stadtwerke Klagenfurt, as the pilot city's utility, is a very strong partner for us, because with the pilot city, we can actually develop the model that then later can be replicated throughout Europe from other cities. We built a solid network on top of the existing networks, right, to basically pitch this fund to various industry leaders and partners all across the continent. We have a wide range of angel investors that we find within networks that we have already, which we also try to motivate to participate in the fund, because those angel investors can also diversify their own portfolio, but also would find certain companies in the need of additional capital, which they cannot provide individually. So this can be also a friendly co-investor for them, and it's highly synergetical to address this. And last but not least, we will hear Guenther later. The network with family offices makes a lot of sense, as those are usually more long-term driven, and family offices also do understand that we face big challenges due to climate resilience all across the world. Now, for us, the CEC-related startups basically get into a funnel. We then evaluate with the pilot city of Klagenfurt if those related startups match the needs of the city utility. And if there is a strong likelihood that they would collaborate with the startup, we also take into account that this would be the case for other city utilities and can be replicated out of the portfolio. And basically then we just check on the investment criteria if it's also from an economical standpoint an investment that has enough growth potential and makes sense in the case of diversification within the portfolio.
So the real question is, what is the business model of the future? And if we go to the next slide, and I think it is hopefully the circle, right? And to remember why and how we came there. So if you remember that very first slide of, say, our grandparents or great-grandparents' working environment, that was the linear economy. And to be very honest, I don't think that anybody can improve that a bit because everybody from BCG to PwC, from KPMG to EY has worked on that. And the reality that happens today is that everything is produced in, well, let's be very honest, in the Far East. So all you need to do is look down on yourself and all the beautiful things you're wearing and tell me which has not been produced in Asia. Right. And if you look at your watch and you look at the box it has been delivered in, that has been done in Asia, even if it's a Swiss watch, right? And if you look into your car, it's the same. And if you look around you, like I do right now in my place here, half of the stuff is somewhere from Asia. So that is just a fact. And I'm not saying it's bad, right? We all grew up in this one. And probably if we're living in Austria, in Switzerland, in Italy, in continental Europe, then we're in what I would call the recycling economy. So a lot of the things we're using are being recycled, but still there's a lot of waste being created. So I've been talking about the clothing part. 86%, according to the MacArthur Foundation, of that stuff that is produced in Asia is never even sold. So it goes directly to those big heaps in Latin America, in Africa, right? And that is kind of, whether we like it or not, what happens. If you think about your cars, if you have one, so what's going to happen to it when you don't need it anymore? And the ones who may buy it from you are also not needing it anymore. It's going to be wasted at one point, right? But not here, usually. It's going to end up in Africa, it's going to end up in Latin America, or it's going to end up on one of our waste heaps here. So it's a big step forward and it's good. But if you can just stay on the other slide, just one more second, please. But I think ultimately, if we don't want to have waste, we need to go to the circular economy. And the circular economy sounds like totally new, but it isn't. It basically means you create everything in a way where there is no waste. So everything is being produced in a way where it can be used in the same fashion forever, or if not, it's being returned kind of thing in a way where there is no waste. So everything is being produced in a way where it can be used in the same fashion forever, or if not, it's being returned kind of to soil. And if we go to the next slide now, please. So there's many ways of doing it, and for the past 7 or 8 years that I've been investing in that space, the one that I like most, but it's not the only one, is probably the cradle to cradle way, which looks at things in 2 circles, right? It's the biological cycle and the technological cycle, and I've put them up here in a slide that is based very much on cradle to cradle itself, but they kind of explains how you do that. So if you take your shirt, right, and even if it's tailor-made, if you look down at your buttons, they're plastic, right, and they're making it non-recyclable anymore. And it's not only the buttons, it's also the threads that are bringing the buttons to the shirt and so forth. So average shirt is probably 25 pieces or something like that. So if you want to make that biological again, you need to look on the technological and the biological, how you take everything apart. And the same is true for every piece of things you're using, from furniture to drinking things and so forth, and even all of the things that we are consuming, right? So if you try to just live circularly today, it's not that easy, but it can be done. And I will show you a couple of examples how you bring something in both cycles and how you can make it as it has been, I would say, probably up to the 1920s or 30s, and definitely in the 19th century. So it's not something that is impossible to do. It's just something that really needs a lot of effort and a lot of creativity. But that is the cool part, if you think about the way I've just been showing you before, where how we be working together and where you get all of the creativity of people unleashed. If we could go to the next slide, please. But this one is also very interesting. They're sitting in Bern, and they've been talking about what I touched upon a minute ago, all the things we're wearing, right? So all the beautiful Asian stuff that is done, well, in a way, I can't make it any better, but I actually want to make it better by doing away with it, right? And they are the ones doing that. So they have all the patents, they've been doing it, and they were looking for an investor back then. And I talked to, as Berthold mentioned it before, I believe 70 family offices all across Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and we got to invest zero from them, right? Because nobody understood it. They were thinking in the terms of Hugo Boss and Louis Vuitton and God knows what, and there it didn't make sense. But the right thing in OceanSafe was they were thinking in a different way. They were saying, no, 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 we are providing the material for all of those brands, right? But that again is disruption, and disruption is always very difficult to understand. So OceanSafe, if you want to bring it down, is a textile company, yes, that creates circular and totally biodegradable and toxin-free textiles for everybody else. And I think then at the very end, we found another investor from Germany, one family office who, thank God, got the idea. And the two of us invested, and some smaller angel investors as well. And within 3 months, it was totally turned around. And if we go to the next slide, so they won the Swiss Design Award, they won the Swiss Army, and they won the big brands. And here's just one example, and that is B&B Italia, and that is their very, very famous Camolinoda sofa, and it's been done with material from B&B. So they're doing everything from the new polo shirts for, I believe it's Hugo Boss, to this kind of things, right? And Stella McCartney stepped up and everybody came in, and they're moving this now beyond. Raising a fund, right? And if we go to the next slide, please. That is the really, really difficult part. So a little bit about exelixis. Exelixis is set up by 3 family offices. One of them is my own, and then there is the von Döring family and the Dickel family. And it took us, I think, 2.5 years to get the money, which was 10 million at the time, out of them, to really allow us to invest in the things we really, really believe in. And circular economy is 1/3 of that. The other ones are being longevity and exponential technologies, and we're trying to bring it all together. And we did it, right? And the two I just mentioned as an example in here were probably the first, second or third, I don't know exactly anymore, but under the first ones. And through our own money and not talking about it, but simply investing, we then got a lot of interest from our, let's call it friends network in Switzerland, Austria, and Germany. And those high net worth individuals was not the family offices, it was the people themselves who decided to co-invest with us. We didn't let them into our company, but we set up SPVs on the side. And together with them, we did 13 investments. Well, 14 if you count today, when we just closed another one. And we've been building up a very interesting portfolio, which you can see on the webpage of exelixis Capital. Now, the third step is a small fund of 13 million, of which, again, 1 million is invested in circular economy, which was put up in Cayman, not because I promote it or whatever, but it was really just to keep it low and just to do it. And with that, we are still investing. And at some point, we may be turning the exelixis Capital Fund into a European fund and a bit bigger, and so forth, but we will see about that. But what it really takes is you have to be working in the area, and you have to be very, very honest. There is no way you can talk about circularity and then you fly to all places in the world without paying for that, right? And I learned that myself the hard way, when people were saying, okay, so you flew to whatever, how did you pay for that, right? And did you compensate for that? And I was like, oh no, I didn't, but thank you for making that one clear for me. Which watch are you wearing? Which clothes are you wearing? And so forth. So you're really being scrutinized for if you're really living the idea of circularity behind all of that. And then there's the other thing beyond exelixis Capital, which is still very much our family office setup. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So there is then G Impact Capital, and G Impact is a Swiss-based, Zurich-based advisory firm by Christian Forstinger, Terprak Forstinger, whom I've known for many, many years. So we studied together in Linz, and the one thing she has always done is really impress me. So she started the first fund, G Impact Capital, in I would say 7 years or so ago, 5 years ago for real, with a fund structure in Luxembourg. And we're now building the second fund. If you go on the webpage, you won't find anything about it because also with fundraising, you have to be very, very careful on this one. So it is a second Luxembourg fund. And I think what it's building on, it's the strong history of G Capital itself, the strong partners they've been building up, and that they have been already in circular economy for all those years. So what gives it a bit of a chance to maybe build it is the strong network from G and from exelixis, and to focus on later A's, as I call them, and I'll show you on the next slide what we mean with that, but just give me a second before we go there. So, and we want to have, and that is the idea, 150 million at some point at the end. And we are currently raising 30 millions only from high net worth individuals, because we said if we can't get the 30 millions from them, then there's no way to do the other part. And still, it's a very early venture capital setup. You need to get them. So we're talking to many of the cornerstone investors from the first fund and many others, and it's quite working well. So it's all good. We have the first cornerstone investors who've signed up, and we're quite positive that hopefully by the end of this year, and then for first close in Q1, we will get the 30 million. Once we have the 30 million, only then we will start the webpage and all of that stuff. And then we will go to another 50 million, hopefully, from other high net worth individuals, but then also from family offices, which is very difficult. We can talk about that in the questions, and other initial investors. And then maybe, and hopefully in the third round, we will try to raise another 50 to 70 million from classical investors. But I believe you have to go through those rounds with those typical investors, because otherwise people are not going to believe it. So it's very, very difficult, to be honest, because you need to A, spread the idea, and B, win the various target groups over. And I think the only way we are trying to do that is, first of all, with a great team that is super motivated, and hopefully also the history we have in there. So we didn't just jump on the next big idea, which it definitely will be, but we really want to make it work with all of that goes with it. And if you go to the next slide, and at some point go to the next slide, obviously with the big fund, as it's called, that's going to be later than the fund which Berthold has been explaining, and which we very much love and which we absolutely support, because it's going to be a funnel into us, right? But the average fund size or ticket size of the big fund will be way bigger. So it's going to be 5 to 7 million. It's going to be way later. So we call it A+ to maybe B and so forth. And that's the only way that you can really generate the returns on a bigger scale, right? I mean, obviously you can do it on a small scale, as we've shown with exelixis, and as Berthold will be showing with his fund, but with the big fund, it's obviously going to be way bigger. And since I've already
And I wanted to bring you a specific case that we're working with, just so that you see a bit what we're doing in a use case. So we are working on a project one of our bioboosters is trying to valorize wool in Tagamanent, which is a town, quite small town in Catalunya, as you can see around it. So Tagamanent is here, and around it, 90% of the area is forest. And then there's a bit of agricultural land, and there's also some industry. They have the problem that they need to manage this forest in order to avoid wildfires, and also so they need this forest management, but at the moment the management is basically not profitable, and it's really difficult to make, so no one is really doing it, or not as much as they should. And so they want to implement this model of extensive livestock farming with sheep. And the sheep obviously can do, right now they have them already, the sheep, but they use it more for the meat, for the cheese, and for the wool. But they want also to implement this extensive livestock farming, that they can manage the forest as well. But how to make this profitable model? That's the point. Also, in terms of the wool right now, in Catalonia specifically, we have around 400 tons of wool from the ship, and in Spain it's around 20,000 tons a year. And right now, well, the wool is a natural fiber with high valorization potential, with nice characteristics that it can be applied to many applications, but to be valorized, it needs to be washed and treated. And right now, there are no wool washing plants in Catalonia, and only 1 or 2 in whole Spain. And the bigger ones are in Manchester and China. And the current processes require large amounts of wool and are not cost effective, are very energy consuming, demand a lot of water, use toxic substances, and the wool that we produce in Catalonia and Spain is not of really good quality, so it also is difficult to be used for textile, for example, and so on. So this makes basically these 400 tons of wool in Catalonia and these 20,000 tons of wool in Spain are considered waste at the moment. They're not being valorized, and they don't know what to do with it. So they want to implement this wool washing plan, and of course for it they need investment, but they want to be sure that there's a market for the washed and treated wool, and they want to make sure that their business model is profitable and that there will be enough demand for the final product if they are gonna put this wool washing plant.